Certainly, Bakhyt, could you kindly provide a more detailed narrative of how you first came across Sergey Panteleyevich during the year 1994?
I initially encountered him a little earlier, approximately towards the end of 1991. At the start of 1992, I found myself in Moscow, actively seeking financial backing for a film project I was enthusiastic to create. A friend of mine happened to mention that he was acquainted with someone who might be able to provide the necessary funding. That individual was Sergey Mavrodi. Consequently, I approached him with the proposal to produce a motion picture. So, for him to provide money for me to make a film.
What was the film about? Please tell me in detail.
The movie is titled Ganghofer. We have successfully finished the filming of it. In principle, it is available somewhere on the internet. Additionally, I possess a digital file of it as well. Well, it's quite challenging to thoroughly discuss the movie. It's genuinely something you should experience for yourself. Overall, the cinematic work played an essential and transformative role in my life, especially later on when Sergey initiated this narrative with the shares. Ultimately, as you come to comprehend, nothing occurred by mere chance. Everything unfolded for a particular purpose, and at the right and appropriate moment, it fulfilled one role or another.
I remember meeting Sergey Panteleyevich for the first time. It was memorable and left a mark on me. What struck me was his impressive presence and how confidently he carried himself. The atmosphere was filled with anticipation and intrigue, like something important was about to unfold.
Indeed, that was our subsequent encounter. During our initial meeting on Krasnodar Avenue, I presented him with a sheet of text. However, it wasn't even a complete page, just about three-quarters of one. It was a concise summary of the films. I elaborated that I possess substantial experience with distribution on a nationwide scale, and we successfully organized this distribution, yielding tangible and measurable results, and I comprehend how to generate revenue from it. Consequently, we parted ways, and a few days later, I returned to the apartment and stated, "Yes, I concur." Then it dawned on me, what comes next? We were on the verge of parting ways, and I lacked a phone number or any contact information, and I pondered how to request a phone number. I informed him that if such a resolution indeed exists, we can proceed immediately. I elaborated on the circumstances regarding the film at that particular juncture. The movie was being filmed on traditional film stock, and there was an opportunity to purchase Fujifilm, which was highly appealing due to its superior quality compared to the Soviet Shostka film. Everyone was eager to utilize high-quality film when the chance arose to acquire approximately 20,000 meters, which is about the amount required for a full-length movie. He inquired about the amount of money necessary, and I responded with 20,000. He exited the room for a few minutes and returned with a plastic bag, which he handed over to me. There were two notably substantial bundles encased within the bank's packaging. At that particular moment, they were secured with robust cords and lead seals. Two hefty bundles of kervones, which are essentially 10 ruble bills, a grand total of 20,000. I gazed intently at the individual who was accompanying us. It was indeed the producer. At that particular moment, I understood that I needed to pose a significant question. Consequently, I proceeded to ask it. I suggested, perhaps it would be prudent for me to sign a document at this moment to formally acknowledge the receipt of the funds. He paused for a moment, looked directly into my eyes, and inquired, "Do you have any intentions of absconding with this money?" I responded with absolute certainty, "Absolutely not." He replied, "Well, proceed then, utilize it as needed, document what you spent it on, and note down what you require." I clarified that for non-cash transactions, you present the invoices and I will settle them, and for cash, you will account for it in this manner and receive it. At that very instant, I was struck by something novel, not merely respect, but I sensed a certain significance of his very profoundly, some kind of distinctiveness in my life, or perhaps not yet in my life, but some significance of his, and I realized that I would rather sever my hand than misappropriate anything from him. It's not because I have an inclination for stealing, no, it's not in my character, but at that moment I felt intensely that no, never.
In those days, the sum of 20,000 rubles was roughly comparable to approximately $5,000.
The exchange rate during that particular period was, well, it was the Soviet commercial rate, but somewhat speculative, likely around 1 to 3, with a single dollar costing approximately 3 to 4 rubles. Consequently, 20,000 rubles was equivalent to about $5,000. However, during that time, you could purchase a Soviet automobile with that amount.
Certainly, during that specific period, the worth of the dollar was significantly higher than it is in today's times, so to speak.
Are you implying that the purchasing power was significantly greater during that time period? Is that your intended meaning? Yes, I concur with that assessment. No, well, I can talk about some relative categories now, or rather some external ones, but for me, those were very substantial amounts of money. Like, significant. It's not like people who saw me for the second time in their lives were giving me 20,000 every day. No, not like that. Certainly, I already possessed financial resources as I was actively distributing my film even before I encountered Sergey Pantelevich, and generally prior to the concept of creating the subsequent movie emerged in my thoughts. Consequently, I was residing at the Sevastopol Hotel. Those familiar with Moscow during that era can approximately envision what it was like back then. There are 4 buildings, each consisting of approximately 16 stories. One of these buildings houses Vietnamese residents, while another is home to Chechens. We all gather together, and in the 4th building, there are individuals like myself. We rented rooms there and had a film, 200 individual copies, a 2-part cinematic production. During that period, movies were stored and transported as physical film copies. Each segment consisted of 4 parts, and each individual copy was contained within 4 yovs. A yov is essentially a container for film reels. So I possessed a total of 800 cases. I transported them. Well, fundamentally, during that period, nothing was officially permitted, but eventually we somehow succeeded in organizing a rental. Individuals traveled from various parts of the Soviet Union. I provided them with a duplicate version of the film along with the tickets. They would later return with the duplicate, the funds, and any remaining tickets. By that point in time, I had already accumulated experience in handling comparatively substantial sums of money throughout my lifetime.
At that particular moment, when Sergei Pantelevich provided you with the essential financial resources for the film, he did not hold any shares in MMM or possess any MMM tickets, so there was genuinely nothing happening behind the scenes at all.
No, there existed a cooperative associated with MMM, although I can't precisely recall its exact name. Perhaps it wasn't even referred to as MMM. There was an office situated on Gazgold where they engaged in the sale of computers, office equipment, and various household goods. Sergei left a significant and lasting impression with his decisions. He was exceptionally advanced in all his actions and deeds. When they began engaging with computers, It eventually became evident to them that the primary purchasers were suppliers. During those Soviet-era times, each and every enterprise maintained a dedicated supply department, and within that department, there was an individual who possessed the authority to allocate financial resources, both in cash and other forms. These were the individuals involved. Initially, he established a particular standard, essentially corrupt in nature, where they all received kickbacks. This had a considerable impact on the market during that period. Sergey successfully captured a significant portion of the market share. However, that wasn't the entirety of his achievements. Upon reaching the pinnacle as the number one, he was the pioneering individual to consign computers along with his own merchandise. The entire security team and all the managers who were responsible for overseeing it were completely taken aback. They mentioned that they would simply depart, leave, and not return it. Sergey essentially states that it is quite certain that 30% will not make an appearance during the initial month. It's as if they will vanish completely. They will not be present. Therefore, 30%, and the remaining 70% are satisfactory, as they will bring the funds and acquire additional merchandise from us. Consequently, of this 30%, in the subsequent month, if you regard this 30% as a complete 100%, then 70% will indeed appear. They will provide the necessary funds and purchase the merchandise from us. For those who stay, instead of compensating you, the security service, with monetary payment, it is more cost effective than, well, sending you later to oversee everyone. These were inherent losses, so he clearly comprehended what he was entering into. However, in actuality, it was as if the situation immediately overwhelmed her, taking into account the market and the substantial volume he undertook in the market.
So, if I understood correctly, he just gave the goods without receiving money up front for realization. So, goods first, and then you bring the money later.
Something approximately along those lines. It genuinely frightened everyone who was involved. Essentially, the managers, their salaries appeared to be somehow connected to the overall sales volume. Well, and subsequently, whatever remained, after subtracting the losses, and at that particular moment, they became quite frightened that they might not receive anything at all, and just howled with fear. Indeed.
Fundamentally, for individuals who possess conventional thought processes, it is somewhat of an astonishing revelation, as in, how can this even be imaginable?
One particularly fascinating scenario that deserves highlighting is that there was no promotion occurring at that specific time, yet it was in the process of being carefully and meticulously prepared. There was an expansive warehouse filled with a diverse assortment of consumer goods. It was quite a significant and substantial deal. Essentially, all of it was securely stored within the confines of the warehouse. Sergey reached out and said, "Bakhyt, we need to shoot an ad urgently. The key thing is, you'll contact me later and I'll give you the pricing info. The main point is, there will be prices." So I agreed and went there. Well, I needed some samples to understand what products there were. I went to Gazgolden, to the guys who were handling all of this. I said, "Give me the samples." They asked, "What's this about?" "Well, I'm going to shoot a commercial." "What kind of commercial?" "Well," Sergey Pantelevich said. "What did he say?" "Well, ask him, he'll tell you himself." They eventually reached out to him, and upon discovering the prices he intended to establish, they were genuinely taken aback. They remarked, "We purchased it for a higher amount. It was more expensive when we acquired it. Plus, we incurred expenses on storage and additional things. And the primary concern is, they all understood they wouldn't receive any bonuses. Ultimately, if they're reducing prices to such an extent, where is the profit margin going to come from?" So, he instructed, "Convene on that concept." They gathered. "Please turn on the phone for everyone. It's on now. Could someone stand by the board and write down what I'm going to say?" "Certainly." So, the present cost of capital as of today. They are meticulously documenting the precise percentage that is required to attract the necessary funds. They are noting it down. Secondly, the expense associated with leasing the warehouse space.
Э, Ну,
Well,
короче, еще что-то я не
basically, there's
помню.
something
Ну,
else I
там,
can't remember, but there's this
и вот
price
эту
that he
цену,
sets.
которую он ставит,
This price. And what
вот
are they
эту
asking
цену,
for? They
и что
say,
они просят? Они
give
говорят,
us another
еще
six
дай
weeks
6 недель,
and
и
we'll
мы по
sell it at
хорошей,
a
по той
good
цене
price
продадим
at
через
that
6 недель.
price in
Но
6
тоже
weeks.
это
Or
6,
whether it's
не
6
6,
weeks
это
or not, that's
неизвестно, как это
unknown.
способно.
Let's
Ну, вот
advertise
рекламу сделаем,
and start
продадим.
selling.
Но он,
He
короче, посчитал и
calculated and said,
говорит,
look,
вот
we
смотрите,
lack
у нас
enough
нет
working capital now.
оборотных денег, да,
We
сейчас.
need to attract
Нам
it
придется
and pay
вот
this large amount.
привлекать вот столько-то мы
Well,
заплатим.
the
Ну,
cost
цена
related
денег.
to money.
Или мы
Alternatively,
сейчас за 3
we could
дня
sell the
снимем
entire
по этим
inventory at these
ценам
current
весь склад,
prices within a
перестанем
span of
платить
3
аренду,
days,
у нас
cease
появятся
paying rent,
оборотные деньги.
and thereby
И,
secure
короче,
the
вот
necessary working capital.
они все пришли.
And indeed, they all
Ну
arrived.
что?
However,
А так
it
казалось,
appeared to be
ну
such an
какие-то
act of
совершить, что это,
madness.
зачем это?
What is this, and why proceed in this manner?
He was truly and genuinely astonished.
Здравым
He astonished everyone with his insightful thoughts from the very beginning to the end.
видели
We
локальное,
observed the
но
local
говорит, вы из-за
perspective,
того, что
yet he
думаете о
mentions
своих
it's due to your
процентах,
focus on your
ничем больше
personal
ни
percentages
черта не думаете.
and your domestic circumstances.
И
No, it's
это не
not
глупость, говорит,
unwise,
вы не
he
глупые, вы
asserts,
просто
but you are indeed being
у вас
unwise.
это
You possess just
когнитивности
enough cognitive
хватает только
capability
на то,
to
чтобы на
contribute
собственный
something to your
карман
own financial
что-то
gain.
поделать.
By the way, that is a fundamental issue, in my opinion, overall. However, let's not delve into this topic right now, as it could take quite a while. Abakit, could you inform me regarding this film of yours? Did you approach Sergey for financial backing as a commercial endeavor, if I am understanding correctly, to secure funds for this movie? Is that the manner in which you approached it?
Absolutely.
Did you ultimately succeed? I mean, was the film commercially successful?
No, it did not. Due to the collapse of the Soviet Union, the entire system of film production and distribution completely fell apart. Do you recall that period when movie theaters were empty and abandoned, and there were no domestic films being shown? The American ones had not arrived yet either. There were absolutely no new movie theaters being established. That was precisely around the years 1993 to 1994.
Well, you see, during that period, I was merely a child.
Well, all right. So that's precisely how it transpired. I understand. And Sergei Pantelevich, well, had already sighed deeply in the cinema theater.
Certainly, please share more about that. In fact, not just a little bit, as it is likely the most significant aspect. How did you begin the process of filming advertisements with Leonya Golubkov? How did everything unfold? If it is possible, some of those particular details you have previously shared with me, I think even during our very first conversation.
Fundamentally, what do we possess in this situation? The motion picture. The entire production process has reached its conclusion. It now necessitates distribution. However, there is no longer anyone to whom we can sell it because there is scarcely anything remaining of the distribution network. I presented the film to Sergei Pantelevich at such a prominent location, Red Square, where there was an office. Within the museum, specifically in the historical museum, I believe. Sergei maintained an office in that location, which was leased from Komissarov, who was a figure in the film industry. He previously held a position as a deputy. I am uncertain about his current whereabouts. The producer also works in television. There was a big hall, so we could watch the whole movie. He said it seems quite talented. However, I had to tell him that distribution is currently a major issue. He mentioned, indeed, I comprehend. Subsequently, I requested him to provide support for us, the entire group. That encompasses approximately 15 individuals, to sustain us temporarily, implying covering our hotel expenses and compensations. That is the manner in which it transpired. We'll find something to do that's helpful for him. He says, no problem at all. About a week later, we got our first order and started filming commercials in Moscow. We were skilled filmmakers and knew how to do it well. We had an excellent team with truly valuable people around us. Then, I noticed another group was also filming a commercial for him. I saw that they were filming for him. I said, Sergey, honestly, compared to the guys who did this for you, were like real pros. He said, well, then go ahead and do it. So I started making commercials for various businesses. Indeed, there was quite a bit happening at that time. He initiated the MMM migration, which was a significant project. We produced a commercial for this endeavor. Interestingly, everyone was in favor of the advertising campaign.
To provide further clarification, during the initial phase, when I first became actively involved, MMM did not have any shares in its possession.
Did you become cognizant of the promotional campaign? What held the utmost significance was that the year 1993 signified the era of privatization. It was formally declared that commencing from January 1st, 1993, individuals would be in possession of vouchers that they could utilize to exchange for shares in enterprises undergoing the process of privatization. And during the springtime of 1993, around the month of May, a few individuals approached me and expressed their aspiration to commission an advertisement. I inquired, what kind of advertisement are you referring to? They responded that it was intended for investment fund checks. I communicated this to Sergey and inquired whether I should become involved. He replied, well, if they are compensating you financially and you are comfortable with it, then proceed. And in general, he says, why are you asking? Well, why does it interest you? Why are you asking me whether to do this or not? I didn't ask about other things before. I inquired, well, are you intending to participate in this as well? If so, it will become challenging for me. Like, if you also wish to engage in this, no, please do not be concerned. Continue. And it was the Moscow Real Estate Investment Fund. We developed an advertisement for them, and the challenge was that their timing was exceptionally precisely arranged. In other words, the duration had to be exact, no longer than specified. However, the script that needed to be delivered did not fit within the time limitations. Therefore, I proposed increase the speed simply proportionally, accelerate everything. The people handling it said it wouldn't pass the tech evaluation. I replied, no, it's an ad and is meant to be like that, so let's go ahead. When I gave it to the client, they also asked why it seemed unclear. I told them to trust me and explained why. I said no one here really knows about these vouchers right now. Consequently, if an individual speaks with great confidence regarding all of this, they will be automatically believed. They broadcasted this commercial on television, and the masses of individuals increased even more significantly due to those eager to sell their properties in Moscow. The catchphrase was, Moscow real estate is perpetually in demand. And then Sergey came to the realization that he needed to manage these vouchers. He mentioned, I navigate around Moscow and I observe their voucher receptions with a large crowd gathered there. I feel like yelling at them to stand up and proclaim loudly, hey, you're in the incorrect location.
That was Sergey speaking.
Yes, Sergey said. In August of the 90s, around 93 in Rosul, he mentioned we needed to make an ad for the Chekhov investment fund MMM Invest. So we made an advertisement that simply explained to people what privatization is. Basically, there is something like the total value of assets, which is about 160 million. If you divide the total value by 160 million, you get 10,000. So we conducted this kind of educational session, and it was in a somewhat conceptual animated form. It is when an actual image undergoes processing and is calculated in a specific manner to resemble a drawing. So these two investment funds were among the top 3 in Russia that accumulated the most vouchers. And this entire voucher narrative, by October 1993, everything was already in progress. People were already queuing up at MMM Invest locations. And in October, Sergey informed me that there would be shares and that we needed to prepare advertising materials. Well, I didn't really understand anything at first. Basically, I didn't get how it could keep growing all the time. The money would be there on Tuesday and Thursday, but how to pay it back later.
Why exactly on Tuesday and Thursday? Did he ever provide an explanation for that to you? Do you remember that specific moment?
I did not inquire about it. After some time had passed, I came to the realization that it is absolutely crucial to listen attentively and adhere to his instructions precisely. Avoid adding your own ideas. If something is unclear, comprehension will come eventually. Over time, he influenced me so profoundly that I trusted him entirely and followed his guidance without any question. I still don't completely understand why it was specifically Tuesday and Thursday, but it certainly proved to be effective. Ultimately, I inquired with him regarding the matter. He explained that the current situation unfolding in Russia is a process of privatization. All of these assets, which were previously owned by the state, are now transitioning into private ownership. That is what is being distributed. And these assets are considerably undervalued, not just by tenfold, but by 100-fold, 1,000-fold, and even beyond that. No one throughout the entire nation possesses any money. Essentially, no one throughout the entire nation possesses any money, so we will acquire whatever we are able to with the use of vouchers. What we are acquiring, we are not going to frivolously squander them by engaging in auctions. You understand? He mentions. There are already numerous funds, and they have already accumulated a significant amount of vouchers. But the number of corporatized enterprises whose shares are available for acquisition is quite limited. There are merely a few dozen, and during these auctions, the funds diminish the value of the vouchers when they commence competing with one another for these shares. Well, there was a 200 ruble share of the Cosmos Hotel that went for 3.5 vouchers, which is 35,000. Yes, for example, it is highly profitable, yielding 100%. That's 35,200 rubles a year, so what is that? And he said that we will not participate in this. We will hold on to the vouchers and present them at the very end, the last month and a half. He says everything valuable will be put up then. They are obliged to put it all up anyway. Furthermore, owing to the specific methodology accessible for obtaining shares of Gazprom in exchange for vouchers, he developed his own unique and distinctive system. How could one technically accomplish this in a manner that, generally speaking, it would be feasible to retain a significant block of shares for an extended period of time? I am not completely certain about the exact amount, but I believed it was quite substantial.
It's just people, what percent of Gazprom's shares was bought?
Yes, it might very well be. I've heard that number too, but I can't really judge it myself. I don't have the information. The operation was executed by the very same individuals who were previously involved with the MMM systems. They were also actively participating at a local level. Essentially, he clarified to me that during the preliminary phase, we will acquire everything using vouchers, and whatever we do not manage to obtain with vouchers, we will purchase utilizing the funds that we will be injecting from Tuesday through Thursday. Commencing on July 1st, 1994, the subsequent phase of financial privatization is set to initiate, and at that particular moment, no person within the nation will possess any funds except for us. He was intending to acquire all these properties, and by November, as his examination of statistical trends indicated, the internal turnover constituted approximately one-third.
The internal financial turnover within the country would have shifted to stock investments. Individuals were already receiving their wages in the form of stocks at numerous enterprises. They instructed their accountants to allocate the financial resources into stocks and distribute salaries in the form of stocks to the employees at these enterprises.
Yes, that is correct. MM shares indeed.
By the month of November, In alignment with his detailed strategic plan, it was expected to have been the contrary scenario, with all assets being retained in stocks. By that particular time, he aimed to finalize the transformation of the investment fund and the corporation that issued those shares. His intention was to either amalgamate these assets or issue a comprehensive prospectus for the new corporation and exchange the old MMM shares for these new shares, or disburse money at the most recent rate. Furthermore, for those individuals who held shares in the voucher investment fund, they were presented with the option to either exchange these shares for the new company's stocks or alternatively receive financial compensation. In alignment with his strategic blueprint, it was anticipated that a societal foundation for the enterprise would gradually emerge within the nation. He consistently comprehended this concept in general. He stated that an estimated 2 to 3 million individuals were expected to become co-owners of these assets. He projected that the average account balance for each individual would be approximately $200,000. In the equivalent sum of approximately $200,000, this pertains to the assets acquired through vouchers, which were subsequently converted into monetary value. If these assets were to be consolidated and then allocated among the shareholders, this is the manner in which it would transpire. He intended to distribute 85% while retaining 15% for himself. I inquired, how could this possibly occur? A hostile acquisition, they will negotiate agreements, convene a meeting, and elect you. He responds, Bakhyt, how do you envision an assembly of 2 million individuals? Where would such a gathering take place? How could they possibly convene in such an extensive manner? In this particular context, he elaborates that these 15% enable control, and indeed let the statistics demonstrate. Let those who strive to accomplish something similar compete with me.
Let's take a brief pause from this particular topic. I believe individuals might find it intriguing to learn about the development process of the advertisement concerning Lenin Golubkov. Could you elaborate on how the whole process was initiated? Which specific video did you initially present? The information you provided, I think it would be quite captivating to discover more about the progression of Golubkov, particularly the series from October 1993.
Sergey conveyed to the brothers regarding the financial expenditures involved and emphasized that it was crucial for us to produce a commercial, underscoring the importance of handling it with the utmost level of seriousness to guarantee that everything was of the highest conceivable quality. I approached it with great seriousness. I even enlisted a professional director. We captured it on authentic film. We constructed a complete set. We assembled the entire group of performers. The script was collaboratively crafted by the highly regarded Sasha Blenner-Cherney. In general, he is recognized as a modern artist of the present day. Right now, the music was carefully crafted just for this project. In short, everything is treated with great seriousness. We filmed this specific commercial, and the airtime had already been secured for it. All of these events occurred back at the conclusion of the year 1993. I believe they started broadcasting it around the month of December.
Is it allowable for me to turn away? By that particular juncture, you had already created 2 very successful commercials for 2 funds that were ranked among the top 3 largest voucher investment funds. So by that specific period, this particular commercial had already been filmed. Am I correct in my understanding?
Indeed, that is accurate.
So, with respect to the Moscow real estate market?
Certainly, that is correct.
And for IBOM Invest?
Yes, that's right.
To summarize, for a more comprehensive understanding, as you proceeded through it rather swiftly, and some individuals became somewhat perplexed, essentially you created 2 highly successful advertisements for the primary, one could say, investment funds of that particular era, specifically voucher investment funds.
Yes, Czech investment funds, and also out of the 3 funds in Kazakhstan that gathered the most mutual funds, it turned out that I did 2 of them. So in the territory of the former Soviet Union, I think there won't be anyone else who can show such results.
Of the four funds, two are in Russia and the other two are in Kazakhstan, within the former Soviet Republic region.
Yes.
I would like to further elucidate another specific point. I am attentively listening to you, but a thought continues to persistently trouble me. It seems that Mavrodi discerned something genuinely significant in you as well. So, I asked about the film for a reason, considering that it didn't do well at the box office, but it wasn't your fault. It's just that at the time, the distribution system was, let's say, broken. Pantelike watched the film, and you just mentioned it modestly, but it was like, yes, talented. He undoubtedly maintained a strong personal connection with you, consistently offering his unwavering support. I mean, he definitely recognized some significant potential within you.
I also genuinely believe that I understood him exceptionally well and made every conceivable effort not to disturb him in any way, like absolutely not at all. I observed how numerous individuals aggravated him merely to assert themselves in some manner, and how it exasperated him, yet he still had to handle it. I perceived that. Another aspect that drew us closer was his passion for fishing. He was an avid, truly obsessed and enthusiastic fisherman. I meticulously organized an elaborate fishing expedition in Kazakhstan. He, along with Slava and several members from his personal security team, traveled by aircraft to Umatu. They spent the night at this particular location. In the early hours of the morning, we proceeded to the airport and boarded a helicopter. What an absolutely incredible place it was. We soared into the majestic and awe-inspiring mountains. The previous day, I had dispatched a team on the initial flight with this helicopter to establish the camp and organize everything as you might naturally expect in general. This is my companion who, as a matter of fact, pinpointed this particular location. Consequently, the four of us arrive on the subsequent day. The helicopter descends onto the identical clearing where we had landed the previous day alongside them. Subsequently, the helicopter departs. I find myself pondering, where could you possibly be? How is it feasible to hear a helicopter in this location? In summary, there was certainly no person present. They commenced discharging their firearms. Did you possess any weapons at that specific moment? No, absolutely nothing whatsoever. The guards are casting peculiar glances in my direction, and I am utterly perplexed by the pandemonium surrounding me. In a state of sheer desperation, I commenced pacing in ever-expanding circles, moving progressively farther from the center. Eventually, I stumbled upon a pathway that ascended alongside the stream towards a school. However, upon my arrival, I discovered a camp situated just a few meters away. Yet there, amidst the towering fir trees, not a single sound can be discerned. You cannot perceive any sound from that particular location. They did not even manage to get any rest. Well, in any case, there is remarkably extraordinary fishing further along. It's incredibly astonishing. There I pondered that there couldn't possibly be any fish because the water appears white due to the rapids. It's a truly wild mountain river. I pondered, what type of fish could possibly inhabit this place? However, they possess these impressive 12-meter-long fishing rods. They brought them with them, and the river itself is merely 2 meters in width, perhaps 3, where they engage in fishing.
A mountain river, I understand, right? Some kind?
I was genuinely quite concerned. I couldn't even bring myself to inquire of my friend about the location he had taken us to, whether there were any fish present at all. Then, unexpectedly, one of the guards, as we were strolling around the well, exclaims, "I see a tail, I see a tail." And with those words, he takes this lengthy fishing rod and simply extends it, about one section indeed. He carefully and meticulously ties the fishing line and the hook together. Furthermore, he attaches a slender and elongated stick to the line so it can be easily visible. No additional weight is employed. They subsequently thread vibrant and bright red row onto the hook. And the guard exclaimed, "Over there, behind the large rock, there's a visible tail." He carefully lowers the fishing hook precisely in that spot behind the rock. Instantly, there's a noticeable swirl. Instantly, there's a noticeable swirl. This trout becomes firmly and securely hooked, weighing around 1.5 kilograms, and it struggles with great intensity. to such an extent that I find it quite challenging to even articulate the adrenaline surge I experienced. And eventually, I managed to calm myself down.
You genuinely succeeded in winning him over with the fishing, whereas I did not manage to do so.
I wasn't planning to bribe him, I just wanted to express myself.
To embark on such a lengthy journey, he even candidly discussed the topic of fishing, highlighting how they discreetly offered him an international passport during the acceptance process. He exclaims, "Oh my goodness," he exclaims, "I've never even traveled internationally." He mentions, "I am fully aware of the amount of money I need to pay, like to compensate him financially, so that I would board an airplane to travel somewhere. The sole reason he states that I am eager to travel anywhere, even to the North Pole, even in just my underwear, is for the purpose of fishing with a rod. He expresses that he is completely indifferent. He'll sit there unclothed. He has brought this up multiple times on various programs, but
It is indeed quite an intriguing matter. Permit me to narrate the entire story so that it becomes entirely clear. As we were preparing to depart, we had arranged to take two distinct flights, and Sergey mentioned that we should go last because he wished to fish for a bit longer. And, well, that initial flight took off, but the subsequent one failed to arrive due to the weather turning unfavorable. The belongings were already packed, absolutely everything, and there was nothing remaining to do except stroll along that particular stretch of the river, which was fairly nearby. However, it was likely approximately 500 meters up and 500 meters down. Well, we had to find something to do. Sergey caught fish while I walked with him, chatting. It was clear there was a fish under every rock. If the rock was big, the fish was big too. We first caught the big ones, then the medium, and finally the small ones. In summary, the fish were absolutely abundant everywhere. We participated in fishing like this for approximately 3.5 hours until the helicopter finally arrived. And during that time, we likely became closer, perhaps because it was a relatively extended duration and, well, there was probably a considerable amount of information exchanged. It was relaxed and somehow just felt appropriate.
let us revisit the conversation regarding the advertisement, particularly focusing on the broader audience, this relatively costly one.
The advertisement aired for quite some time, and Sergey refrained from expressing any negative remarks regarding it. Essentially, he did not mention that the commercial was ineffective or that it was not performing well. He stated, individuals can be divided into two distinct categories. There are those who possess the capability to make autonomous decisions. They constitute 5%. And then there are those individuals who do not make decisions independently. They constitute 95% of the population. Therefore, we are not particularly interested in those who make decisions on their own. I asked, so, should we consider reshooting? He says, yes, redo it. He states, simplify it, everything is straightforward. I respond, well, what, just like arrived, purchased, then arrived, understood, received the money? Yes. That is the complete extent of the situation. I was given these particular instructions. This occurred during the month of January in the year 1994, approximately around the 10th day of the month. The newly designated advertising slot for the upcoming commercials had been scheduled for February 3rd, and at that particular juncture, circumstances weren't entirely prepared, or perhaps he assigned me the responsibility at a subsequent time. It's quite plausible that I didn't fully comprehend it. In any case, we were planning to commence filming around the midpoint of the 20th. During the middle of the 20th, a tragic event transpired. A close friend passed away, which incapacitated me for approximately 3 days. By the 30th, or possibly the 31st, the broadcast was intended to take place. I believe we conducted the filming on the 30th. Due to this situation, we were unable to shoot on film because there wasn't sufficient time for development. Among other factors, there couldn't be any constructed sets, so we couldn't even lease a studio to establish any form of basic decoration. Consequently, we had no alternative but to film in the office on Varshavka. When we were organizing this shoot, I requested two directors to bring actors of various ages. Certainly not merely a single individual, but perhaps a pair or even a few, and I would observe, because I didn't quite grasp what exactly to film or the method to film it. We arrived at the office premises. They informed me that they had brought in the actors. I descended the stairs. There was a considerable number of them. They hadn't even been ushered inside yet. I wondered, should we invite everyone in? Every individual present will be captured on film. I surveyed the entire group and declared, all individuals are approved. Each person will be filmed. So what actions did I undertake? I categorized all the individuals who had arrived into pairs. For example, there were numerous young individuals. They arrived collectively as a group, and I recorded on film how they managed to accomplish it. They proceeded to that location, made purchases, and departed. They returned once more, obtained, traded shares, acquired funds, and departed again. It all transpired in a single location, somewhat resembling an assembly line. Subsequently, materialized content emerged with all of this. We proceeded to assemble it utilizing sound, or rather, not even solely by sound. In essence, we were required to generate some form of text. We enlisted the assistance of a voiceover artist. And with the collaboration of this voiceover artist, we devised names for each and every one of them. Those particular lines, coupled with his unique and distinctive vocal tone, were prominently showcased in the 1994 advertisement, serving as a concluding voiceover that encapsulated and narrated the sequence of events that unfolded. Everything appeared to stem from necessity, pressing deadlines, and circumstances that required fulfillment. There was a noticeable lack of a strategic plan. It was solely about adhering to the deadline. And the decisive tipping point was that when we were in the process of assembling the final version, the one that was destined to be broadcasted, we found ourselves needing to incorporate some form of music into it. At the precise moment when the inquiry emerged regarding which music to utilize, there happened to be a radio station playing in that control room, and Rio Rita was being broadcasted there. I glanced at the screen, already envisioning how Rio Rita would harmonize with everything, and I remarked, folks, we won't contribute anything detrimental to Rio Rita. That's how Alan Golubkov made his appearance. When we were shooting that initial segment, we had no intention of continuing to film it. Initially, there was absolutely no such concept, and we were on the verge of discarding it entirely. However, once it became evident that it was effective, it became undeniably apparent, and we commenced developing these characters as they naturally emerged.
Could you kindly provide additional context or clarify which specific phrase you are inquiring about in the series?
During the initial filming of the very first module, Volodya Permyakov, the actor portraying the character Leonia Golubkov, was required to deliver the line, "I'll buy boots for my wife." Initially, he articulated it with a standard intonation. Consequently, I requested him to modify the intonation and convey it in a different manner. He subsequently recorded it with this adjusted intonation, and I sensed that we had stumbled upon something significant, that it resonated in some meaningful way. Regarding the events and the complexities of how this particular advertisement functions, I eventually found myself in a rather amusing situation. It was probably during the daytime, likely in the early part of April, specifically April 1994, when I was seated with some companions in a dining establishment. In the very center of Moscow, amidst an exceptionally elegant and sophisticated establishment. It was located within a hotel, intercontinental essentially. There existed a dining establishment where the sole location where lobsters were, alive at that particular moment. And it wasn't really about the lobsters themselves, it was simply a gathering there. So we were seated in the hall, conversing softly, enjoying our meal, and at a certain point, everyone abruptly fell silent with their food, and from various directions, phrases from advertisements began to reach us. This was because different individuals who were present in the hall at that time were somehow conversing about and discussing this subject. And absolutely everyone listened with exceptional attentiveness, and each individual fully comprehended the subject matter and simply burst into laughter. It was genuinely astonishing. It was so unexpected in such an environment, like from every direction, just like that. Alternatively, without any further options available, the editors who worked in collaboration with us, they carefully and meticulously refined some of the trendy content and everything, and I felt somewhat self-conscious about the reality that, indeed, I needed to guide them to accomplish it. Well, they didn't conceal the fact that, in their perspective, it was utterly worthless.
And when you put together that video, so to speak, in a hurry with that looming deadline, you probably thought of it as some sort of trash too, didn't you?
No, I do not perceive what I create as junk. I simply endeavored to execute what Sergey had outlined. As I comprehended, I made every effort to ensure there was something lively and engaging in it, not merely functionality. There was something classic.
I am of the conviction that it is approximately 6 or 7 scenes in total.
Approximately 6 or 7 scenes, I believe, around 6 or 7 segments in entirety.
6-7 блоков.
Nonetheless, they are compiled and collected somewhere on YouTube. They are situated somewhere there.
Yes, they exist. I've come across them too. Certainly, I was genuinely quite intrigued to gain a deeper understanding from you about how the severely devastated, well, how should I phrase it, rental industry ultimately ended up being advantageous to you. Could you elaborate further? Because for me, it was truly a significant revelation at that particular moment in time.
Certainly, as the events were unfolding concurrently, when Sergey made the decision to sell shares, the sole organization genuinely capable of proficiently executing such an undertaking was us, the filmmakers. Filmmakers possess the capability to accomplish anything, whether it involves crafting intricate decorations or any form of production. And he entrusted me with an extraordinary task. I was uncertain about how I would articulate it to my team. What exactly was the task at hand? The initial step was to initiate the system in Moscow. In what precise manner? Obtain collapsible tables, ensure the acquisition of those vital components, frameworks that need to have a unique identity, symbols, an educational curriculum, recruit individuals from the streets, and distribute shares to them. Supply them with these collapsible tables, and furthermore, we shall stitch something resembling uniforms, ensuring that every element is thoroughly in place. We designed aprons embellished with green typography and all the elaborate details. Then deploy them to Moscow's underpasses. We successfully achieved it. And indeed, individuals began returning and bringing back funds. Some, however, did not come back and did not bring any money. There were quite a number of those for a period of time as well. And the financial resources that were accumulated through this particular method became adequate enough to lease a variety of different locations. Subsequently, the question emerged regarding how to extend our reach across the entire nation. I conveyed to Sergey that the rental enterprises have notably diminished, yet theaters persist in their operations, and we have connections who are directors of theaters and leaders of these rental organizations in nearly all major metropolitan areas. We can commence discussions with them and lease a box office space to establish a stock trading site. He responded, "Excellent, proceed." And we successfully launched trading points nationwide within a span of 3 weeks.
И мы за 3 недели открыли пункты по всей стране.
And he stated, essentially, these individuals are under your supervision, so you must assume responsibility for them. You and your team ought to enhance the development of the points, as you possess a significant interest in it, given that you receive 1.5% of the total turnover and you manage everything with that, handle the advertising, and so forth. Provide remuneration to the individuals for their salaries, and most importantly, enhance the system of points. From that foundation, it expanded to Bulgaria and beyond the borders. All of this was within the scope of responsibility.
Indeed, it is quite fascinating how destiny unfolded in such a manner that your experience in the realm of film distribution eventually turned out to be beneficial in ways that were previously unimaginable, especially when it comes to managing budgets of this magnitude. It truly feels surreal, doesn't it? Reflecting on it now, we might chuckle, yet these are genuinely significant matters. These are the processes that fundamentally impacted and shaped the contemporary appearance of our nation, and they were executed during that particular period. In actuality, all that left-wing privatization that ultimately occurred, along with everything else.
He was the sole individual who aspired to steer this privatization in a manner that would be advantageous for a substantial number of individuals. Indeed, truly, he wasn't exactly Robin Hood. He approached it with quite particular rational and considerably mercantile considerations. However, within his mercantilism, the advantage for several million individuals was deliberate. Thus, he comprehended that in this manner, the situation would remain stable, and with such backing, a great deal could indeed be accomplished.
Consequently, he did not wish, for example, even for those who were captivated by the catalogs without any consequences. All of this began, the conflict was already involving him. He did not genuinely spend that wealth on himself. By the way, could you elaborate on how he lived during those years? What activities did he partake in? Perhaps you might even remember some instances that have not been shared with me yet. How did he allocate his money? Something more personal. Because individuals, in reality, the present participants, you ought to at least comprehend, since the year 2011, even when I attended the funeral, those individuals, by the way, I'll make a presumption, I won't emphasize them, but you mentioned that you traveled to Kazakhstan for a fishing trip with a guard, with Slava, I understand, that's with your younger brother, correct? And I assume that those identical individuals were present at the funeral ceremony. Well, it's quite possible, considering that one of them was from his personal security detail, nearly a former chief of Alphavitz. He is already advanced in age, even slightly older than you. Thus, here's what I wish to convey. At the commemorative gathering, when we commenced exchanging our recollections of Sergey Mavrodi, we occasionally halted and inquired like, hold on, are we discussing the identical individual? I mean, these elderly gentlemen, so to speak, would interrupt me. Hold on, are you certain you're referring to Sergey Mavrodi? Because you see, after he was released and I got to know him from MMM 2011, from the year 2011, he was, so first of all, you have to understand, everything he had was seized, right? I mean, he had nothing. He was in a really tough situation in that sense, and he played his way out of it, and in my opinion, he did it in a most brilliant way. I was genuinely amazed by this specific fact, that the person had almost nothing, and yet he successfully managed to rebuild everything from the very start, once again. Because the MMM 2011 was rather successful, and of course the magnitude and concept were different, but nevertheless, how he essentially rejuvenated individuals, I believe, based on my own experience, considering the immense energy he provided me during that period. And I was at such a highly productive stage of life. At that point, I had already lost hope in the conventional business world, as I was engaged in the real estate sector. It was merely a complete deception, this overwhelming sensation that there was disorder everywhere. And when Sergei Pantelevich appeared on the horizon, it was, without exaggeration, like a light at the end of the tunnel for me. I was truly amazed. I read his blog thoroughly for a month, from morning till night, all the broadcasts, like a madman. I was already freelancing at that time, so I had plenty of free time. Thank goodness, by the way. Subsequently, I genuinely began to appreciate time more than financial wealth or any other material possession. In life, you pursue what you sincerely desire, engage in activities that captivate your interest, and so forth, and I recall it with remarkable clarity, and it even causes me to feel somewhat uneasy each and every time. So, where was I heading with this narrative? Oh dear, I seem to have misplaced my train of thought.
Certainly, you inquired about engaging in a conversation concerning something related to an individual, correct?
Absolutely, indeed. A narrative derived from real life that genuinely astonished him. A straightforward human tale for individuals to fully comprehend and appreciate.
Because numerous individuals tend to demonize him, you know. Those who have been acquainted with him since 2011, who aren't familiar with him from 1994, all seem to believe that he is, well, I am not entirely sure, not precisely altruistic, but people simply fail to grasp that he has consistently had such interests, in fact.
Some that are, well, different from, well, the usual.
Certainly.
I am entirely capable of narrating to you regarding what transpired with me and the invaluable lessons that I encountered.
Certainly. Absolutely.
At this particular moment, I might even, well, in any event, the specific details. So it ultimately turned out to be one of the most important and significant lessons in my entire life. An occurrence took place within his apartment, specifically within his room. I would meet with him approximately once every single week. Our meetings were consistently held in his room. It is a relatively narrow and confined room. On one side, there is the entrance door, and on the opposite side, a window. Along both sides of the wall, there are these features on both sides of the windows. They are not particularly wide either, perhaps approximately a meter in width, just a little bit more than that. The room is elongated from the entrance with a television positioned on the right-hand side, accompanied by an audio system and various other items. Beneath the window, there's a table, and to the left side, a couch is placed. All the walls are adorned with numerous small boxes containing insect collections, butterflies, and similar items. He sits on the couch, and I take a seat on a chair. He says, "Tell me, do you think what we're doing resembles a pyramid scheme?" "Be honest," Sergey says. "It truly appears quite similar to a pyramid scheme, that's what I can say. It looks a lot like it, approximately 90 to 95% similar to a pyramid scheme. So is it a pyramid scheme or not?" I say, "It looks like it. It looks like it. I felt it." He stands up and says, "Come here." I approach, and he shows me two boxes hanging on the wall, not far from each other. They are identical in size, absolutely the same in color, in everything. And inside, to me, they appear like identical dried specimens. He says, "This looks like it, very much so." This, I am absolutely convinced, is a hummingbird. Both specimens appear to be. However, observe with more focused attention, I examine more thoroughly and declare, well, it is indeed 95% similar, everything corresponds, the intricate details correspond, and the distinctions are quite insignificant. Observe, they appear quite similar, correct? Well, this one is a bird, and this one is an insect. There are 200 million years of evolutionary development separating them. For myself, it was an extraordinarily powerful lesson. It has saved me on numerous occasions in a deeply serious manner. When I was analyzing a specific situation and it seemed to be so remarkably similar to something else, but recalling what Sergey mentioned, I never regarded it as the actual thing, only as something resembling it. And then it would unfold, and it genuinely saved me multiple times. As an individual, he was remarkably enthusiastic and spirited. To summarize, it genuinely frightened me. During that period, before the existence of any formal stocks, there was this kind of unofficial interbank system operating in Moscow. The Chechen individuals possessed financial resources, and they would provide loans to business people whenever there was a shortage of cash flow at a significantly elevated, yet mutually agreed upon interest rate. Essentially, they functioned similarly to a banking institution, but at a rate of 3%. Consequently, Sergey borrowed funds from them. However, the money was not returned within the agreed upon time frame. Indeed, they were not overly concerned because the late payment penalty had been previously established and agreed upon with Froco. After a certain period, when the principal sum was prepared and they computed the interest, they collected it, summed it up, and the individuals proceeded to return it. They delivered it there and contacted Sergey, informing him that those individuals had altered the price. And the Chechen individual stated that essentially you failed to call, you did not make contact, therefore the revised interest rate is different, something along those lines. Sergey responds, well, take the funds and come back. They took the funds and returned. What should be done? He says, simply forget about it. How am I supposed to forget? These are truly serious individuals. All right, I shall manage it on my own.
Simply disregard it.
They are remarkably similar to a few weeks pass by. Essentially, they mention, Sergey, there remains an unresolved matter. It's lingering there. It's all expanding exponentially. Well, they are formidable, perilous, and resolute. He responds, in summary, do not trouble me. Leave me be. I will manage it on my own. Another 2 weeks pass. Everyone is expressing, oh, Sergey, there are circulating rumors. They are like that. It's quite perilous. They possess a formidable reputation. You absolutely cannot meddle with them. They uphold their reputation firmly. Sergey responds, well, allow me to contact him immediately. He proceeds to make the telephone call. He communicates with the individual who conveys the message to Sergey. Nothing personal, just business. That's precisely the phrase they conveyed. Nothing personal, just business. Exactly like that. And he responds, gentlemen, well, I've conducted the calculations based on what you informed me. And according to your assessment, I am indeed indebted to you. Please do not take it personally. It's strictly business. For half of that sum, I will employ 300 enforcers armed with Kalashnikovs, and you can handle the situation with them. And he ended the call. During that particular time frame, it was indeed feasible to issue a check for several $1,000s, or more precisely, 2,000 each. Subsequently, 200 individuals equipped with Kalashnikovs could arrive from Kazan to handle the situation. Such individuals were indeed capable of making an appearance. After a period of time had elapsed, those individuals made contact again and conveyed that everything was satisfactory. They instructed to bring it along, similar to when you were previously bringing that other item, and to bring this as well. Essentially, everything was in good order, just like that.
Certainly, I'm of the considered opinion that it would indeed be highly advantageous if we were to engage in a thorough discussion, perhaps at this particular moment, about the subject matter you introduced concerning the correspondence with Sergey, especially in relation to his novel. You possess some truly fascinating materials in that context, but for the present time, of course, let's keep it in as broad strokes as feasibly possible.
Well, in actuality, regarding the rationale behind my decision to step forward, what precisely was it? Recently, I have been concentrating on augmenting my authority and systematically organizing my comprehensive archive. During this endeavor, I unearthed a particular section of the archive that is related to Sergei. Within this section, I discovered a substantial amount of correspondence. Furthermore, I came across he would occasionally toss some unrefined concepts my direction, like this and that could potentially be accomplished and so forth in a literary sense. For a period up until the year 2011, well, he was endeavoring to earn a living through his literary endeavors. Among these literary creations, he carefully crafted the screenplay entitled Pyramid, and in addition, other literary texts were in the stages of preparation for publication, so he exchanged a multitude of ideas with me. I am presently reading it, and I am genuinely astonished by his chronicling capabilities. What he depicted and proposed is extraordinarily clear today, especially with all the events unfolding at this moment. It motivated me to write to you, and then we conversed, and in my opinion, it is absolutely unique material, completely unforeseen. It is something I would like to develop in the form of, well, it is somewhat analogous in format to Golubkov. These are concise series with characters who will become clear over time, but are incredibly unexpected. The storyline he envisioned back in 2008 or 2007 is just unreal in its sense.
с персонажами, которые через какое-то время будут понятны. Но нереально неожиданные персонажи, фабула, вот то, что он ее провидел в каком-то 2008 году, 2007 году, вообще нереально.
Certain occurrences that are presently unfolding are indeed taking place.
Происходит, да.
Certainly, which captivates the attention of everyone from an exceptionally remarkable perspective through which you perceived it.
Э,
Indeed, it is quite characteristic of Sergei Panteleyevich to, let's say, be significantly ahead of his contemporaries. The broader perspective is often observed from a considerable distance. As you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, when you talked about how the guys monitored their percentages or something similar, he perceived the situation in its entirety. This remarkable ability of his apparently also astonished me, how he could analyze matters comprehensively and with calmness and subsequently make informed decisions. You also mentioned to me that he instructed you to take a significant leap either from the rooftop or the 10th floor when he assigned you tasks that appeared utterly suicidal to you, essentially tasks that you absolutely should not undertake under any circumstances.
But I never did that, and I've never interacted with such people. I have no experience and I don't understand them. It is evident that in my mind, it was undeniably the 10th floor. Perhaps for another individual, it might not even constitute a floor, merely a casual stroll. Yet, for me, it was an enormous lesson. Nevertheless, after the initial instance, when I was compelled to adhere to his instructions and everything was validated, well, it serves as a metaphorical representation of the 10th floor. However, he advises me to simply leap without any fear. As you descend past the 6th floor, the parachute will automatically deploy. As you approach the vicinity surrounding the 2nd floor, you will observe a brass ensemble and a luxurious crimson carpet. Everything will unfold in an impeccably perfect manner. And when it indeed transpired in that manner, it was completely unforeseen for me. I didn't understand the situation, but it happened just as he said. To me, it seemed like he was a magician. So why should I think for myself now? I just need to follow what he says, that's all.
You have just highlighted an essential aspect, if you would. It's precisely as if, envision, all the participants of MMM clearly recognize it in that manner. Quite literally like a magician. Individuals endure a mundane gray existence where everything is monotonous, akin to studying, working, and then... So, let's assume MMM emerges here, and as it turned out, one of my previous bosses in the real estate sector, who is quite a prominent figure locally, so to speak, has accomplished a great deal and is commercially prosperous. Anyway, he says, "Listen, Danil," and we were conversing in 2012 regarding MMM terminals for registration in the personal account. He oversaw a network of shopping centers, meaning he was responsible for managing commercial real estate. He was engaged in leasing, maintenance, and the entire narrative, which is often referred to as comprehensive property management. This encompasses all aspects, ranging from floor maintenance to the leasing of these spaces, including boutiques, just as shopping centers began to emerge. While the influx of petrodollars commenced, so to speak, it was approximately during the period when MMM 2011 made its appearance. In those earlier days, we collaborated closely, but by the year 2012, I was engaging with him not in the capacity of an employee, partner, or colleague. Instead, I approached him with a specific request to set up terminals, akin to ATMs, within shopping centers for the purpose of VVM registration. These terminals were essentially computers with personal accounts accessible, fundamentally speaking. It is all intricately connected to the internet. And then he proceeds to tell me, "Danil, while we are engaged in a conversation sipping on tea and coffee, he mentions, you might not believe it at this particular moment. I'm listening to you. And it seems like such an absurdity, right? Yet, I'm recounting to him about MMM 2011. And he responds, well, he says, I accumulated my initial capital thanks to MMM. Nevertheless, he continues, he transformed a few $100s into tens of thousands. Essentially, it was akin to a miracle during that particular period. And he mentions, are you aware of what the most remarkable aspect of this situation is? This is exactly why I remembered this narrative now. You served as a catalyst for me when you mentioned the wizard. I haven't truly shared this story with anyone else because, he explains, during the time when I was involved with MMM, there was already a commotion starting, and I succeeded in selling the tickets. And that's essentially the entire story. And he mentions, all of my friends, he explains, I'm genuinely apprehensive to share this with them because they might throw tomatoes at me. They would probably say, what are you fabricating? This is absurd. It's a scam. Do you comprehend to what extent? However, he states, am aware that it all functions. Now he mentions, you approached me after, approximately speaking, significantly more than a decade. How much time had elapsed by that particular moment? 15 to 16 years? From the year 1994 all the way to 2011. It was already 2012. I'm sure there was a restart in 2011. This whole story with the rally and the provocations. And he mentions, no, he simply informs me, you are aware, like I am not entirely certain, akin to a preacher or something similar. He states, I am able to confide in you because you possess the knowledge, you comprehend. He observes, you purchased an automobile there, I perceive, correct? I respond, well, indeed, everything is satisfactory with me. I mentioned I joined that venture successfully, and that's it. But he replies that all his starting capital came from MMM. Plus, he says nobody knows this, not even his wife. She had a daughter then, well, consequently, it is highly probable that for the overwhelming majority of participants, and this could very well be the distinctiveness of this particular scheme, for the majority of individuals, it genuinely functions like a form of enchantment. Because, as you accurately mentioned, for you it's the 10th floor. For them, those percentages are something inconceivable, something nearly surreal. And for Sergey Panteleyevich, who just, well, he meticulously scrutinized, so to speak, the intricate architecture of the financial system back in the year 2011. And by that particular point in time, he was already presenting entirely different and innovative concepts. That is to say, if you discuss the year 1994, it appeared technically feasible and completely realistic to you at that specific moment, similar to acquiring stocks and creating new stocks. Well,
as a result, these financial institutions, which eventually obtained the complete collection of these valuable assets, gathered together and arrived at a consensus on collaborative actions. And from that particular moment onward, the information warfare against MMON commenced. They elaborated to Tatiana Dyachenko regarding what Sergey was engaged in, that the arrangement they had agreed upon to divide would not come to fruition. This was due to the fact that these banks were devoid of any actual funds. All these specialized mechanisms were devised, such as collateral auctions, and Norilsk nickel was sold for a mere $10 million, not utilizing Tatiana's own money, but rather with funds from Onexim Bank, transferred from one account to another within the same financial institution.
absolutely accurate.
I am expressing that Sergey was explicitly opposed to that entire framework, and naturally, a substantial amount of effort was dedicated to maligning him so that his reputation would not be perceived as commendable.
In its current condition, do you think that this specific issue can be effectively resolved?
Certainly, you can effortlessly articulate precisely who he was, where he congregated, and what his aspirations and ambitions were. Moreover, he was an extraordinarily responsible individual and an exceptional patriot. In the year 1994, he was actively engaged in correspondence with Bela Zlatkis. During that period, she was, I believe, in charge of the Securities Management Division.
Absolutely, with Antroban. Certainly, with Antroban, absolutely.
And he meticulously composed a letter addressed to her. Unfortunately, at a certain juncture, my email system experienced a malfunction, and I am unable to stop it. There are no correspondences from that period remaining. But what precisely did he convey to her? He meticulously articulated that conflicts are often waged over exceedingly valuable resources. Modern day conflicts differ significantly from those of previous eras. They do not predominantly involve conventional weaponry. Instead, what is transpiring currently, as he elaborated in his writings, involves the extraction of resources from Russia, which he likened to warfare. He conveyed, both verbally and in written form, that in warfare, as in any conflict, specific dynamics prevail. He suggested the establishment of a governmental system in numerous other nations with the intention of disseminating it both nationally and on a global scale. Ultimately, certain individuals took advantage of this situation.
They were designated as a particular term, yet you can clearly observe how they took advantage of the circumstances, as they claim they possessed a Kishkato tank. They simply established the GKO not with the intention of expanding on a worldwide scale, but rather to gather the remaining funds from the impoverished, deceived, and essentially dispossessed populace at that time. Even in the present day, all this GKO, well, all these updates I just read today, that there was an increase in the central bank's rate, which is, by the way, associated with financial pyramids. You know, we succeeded in returning the majority of the deposits that flowed out in February, March. Well, yes, and this pyramid, so to speak, well, I would like to somehow summarize, not exactly a conclusion, but to somehow encapsulate those, let's say, but we discussed them more closely. We won't voice all this now, of course. These unique materials that you possess from Sergey, what is your opinion? Can they be somehow adapted, put to use, so to speak? I would even say, I would say as broadly as possible for the dissemination and popularization of Mavrodi's work.
Вы как думаете, ну, то есть их можно как-то, ну, экранизировать, как-то их пустить в дело, скажем так, даже я скажу так, я скажу максимально широко, по обелению и популяризации творчества Мавроди?
Could this potentially be employed in an efficient and effective manner?
The enhancement of the image could indeed be feasible, yet the work itself communicates its own value. Read in a detailed manner.
On the enhancement of the image and the widespread popularization of creativity. That is more precise.
This was the subsequent subject matter we discussed. It is an extensively detailed and substantial cinematic masterpiece concerning historical contexts about what genuinely transpired during that particular period. It delves deeply into the decisions he made amidst the backdrop of all these contexts. However, in reality, he stood alone against the formidable tempest. The formidable tempest was advancing from all conceivable directions, and no one truly comprehended or perceived him in a thoroughly comprehensive manner. Even those individuals who gained significant advantages from him, such as the numerous investors who reaped substantial profits. Subsequently, when his reputation was being shaped as that of a deceitful fraudster, only a small number of those who benefited spoke the truth about how positively the narrative impacted him.
They simply remained in the background. As the saying goes, money appreciates silence, indicating they didn't advocate for him on a fundamentally human level, not even verbally, as I did.
I had my own personal encounter. At a specific moment in time, Sergey appointed me as a crisis manager. There were circumstances where individuals threatened to end their own lives or publicly set themselves ablaze. I went to confront and resolve these conflicts with these individuals. Indeed, but what genuinely struck me was that I immersed myself into each narrative, meticulously analyzing it, and I was genuinely sincere in my earnest desire to assist these individuals. Danil, not even one person came forward to ask for the return of their initial investment. Every single one of them articulated, well, I put in my money on the very last day at this rate of 127, so give it back to me at 127. None of them, well, they may have invested at different times. Some put in 10, some 20, some even 50,000 into the stock, right?
However, every single one of them, without exception, communicated to me as if indicating that they did not require the return of anything that wasn't rightfully theirs, yet they expressed a desire to reclaim what was indeed theirs. They invested a significant amount. Indeed, I am such an unfortunate and naive individual. I purchased at the very final rate and am requesting to be reimbursed at that same rate. It was quite disheartening and upsetting. I hoped perhaps at least one person would be different, just one. At least a single individual stepped forward, which was truly a blessing for me. But in reality, more than just one person did. So indeed, there are individuals.
They were, in fact, engaging in deception by claiming that they made their purchase at the very last possible moment and now wish to sell at the most recent rate.
Upon examining the situation, I discovered there were genuinely challenging circumstances for individuals, such as seriously ill children and various other issues, yet they continued to request it at that specific rate. However, I managed it as Sergey advised, asserting that essentially everything can indeed be resolved with financial resources.
Resolving it with financial resources, indeed, he was narrating an account concerning a lady who was also participating in a program. No, she was pursuing them independently, essentially with the assertion that they misled her, that they owed her 8 million, but reimbursed only a few 100,000, even though she had contributed just a minuscule amount. Well, that's the entirety of it, but it's a matter of psychology, you understand. That's where the moral compass resides, that's the mechanism of the system. If this aspect of human psychology didn't exist, this act of giving, no one would introduce money into this void. That's the essence. So awareness and other elements are the foundation. That's fundamentally the expression Sergei Pantelevich conveyed to you, that 5% of individuals are capable of making deliberate decisions, individuals capable of contemplating in general to be straightforward, and the remainder are simply like that, and they're not unintelligent.
А все остальные, они вот, ну, вот так вот. А как, ну... И ведь они не глупые. Я вот
I
это постоянно
continuously
повторяю.
reiterate
Люди,
this point.
которые меня
The individuals
слушают,
who
они
listen to me
соврать
can
в том
attest to
смысле,
the
что
fact that I
я всегда
consistently
обозначаю
provide very
совершенно
specific
конкретные
and
причины.
concrete
Причем это у
reasons.
вас даже
Furthermore,
в
this
нашей
topic
личной
even
беседе
emerged during
проскочило.
our
Вы
personal
говорите,
discussion.
что
You
это
mentioned that
не,
it's not, how did you express
как
it?
же вы
Well, that these
сказали,
individuals are not
что это
inherently
не
bad
люди
people. It's
плохие, это якобы
supposedly a
беда,
misfortune, a
болезнь, что
condition
вот
that
у
they
них
find themselves in certain
обстоятельства.
circumstances. Yes, indeed, it's not
Да,
their
да, это не
fault, it's
вина,
a
это
misfortune.
беда.
They
Что у них
simply
нету
lack the luxury of
времени, у
time,
них
as they have
семья, дети,
familial
там,
obligations,
обстоятельства, и
offspring, and
действительно, когда
various
ты только
situations
вот,
to
ну, не
contend
можешь
with,
разрулить,
and indeed,
уже
it's
настолько все
impossible
далеко
to
зашло,
untangle it all.
что,
Matters have
конечно,
escalated to
деваться
such
просто
an
некуда.
extent that
Они сверху
naturally
белого
they have
видят,
no
глаза не
alternatives.
поднимают,
They
и
can't
всю вот эту
perceive any
лапшу
hope.
ушей там
They don't
про
raise their heads,
МММ
and they
уходной,
absorb
там
all this
Мавроди
misinformation
мошенник,
about
они все
MMM being
глядят и как бы,
fraudulent.
ну,
And, well,
куда
what other
деваться?
options do they truly have?
То есть надо
So,
же как-то
you must
жить,
somehow
детей,
manage to live,
там, семью
nourish,
кормить,
and
одевать,
provide for your
поэтому
offspring and family, and therefore,
Мавроди мне в свое время
however,
одну фразу
once
такую
an
сказал,
individual shared a phrase
вроде бы
with
ничего
me. It
такого, но она
appeared to
мне
be
настолько
nothing
запала в душу.
extraordinary, but it
Он говорит,
truly
Данил,
resonated with me. He mentioned Danil, an
голодный, говорит, не
individual who
может
is hungry,
подавать.
he stated, cannot give. You
Поймите,
see, an
типа,
individual who is in need
ну,
themselves,
что человек,
you
который вот
cannot
сам в
reasonably
нужде, он не
anticipate
может
anything
от него чего
substantial
ждать.
from them.
Ему
They
нужно
require
сначала
assistance
помочь самому,
initially
то есть,
to
безусловно,
fulfill their
то есть как бы
fundamental necessities
перекрыть его
so that they
базовые
can,
потребности, чтобы
and
он
then
уже...
that is precisely
А
what
дальше как
transpires in
раз-таки вот
reality
что и
with the
происходит, собственно, с
participants of
участниками
MMM.
МММ. То есть вот
So,
люди, мы недавно это тоже
individuals, we
обсуждали, да,
recently
это, кстати,
engaged in a
тема у нас
conversation
злободневная. Вот
regarding
как
this
люди
matter as
меняются в
well.
системе.
Indeed,
Кстати,
following
может,
this
у вас какой-то
subject,
случай
it
есть?
has emerged as our trending topic
Ну, вот
concerning how
какой-то конкретный
individuals
человек,
experience
который, возможно, ты
transformation within the
участвовал
system.
в
By the
определенном
way, do you have any specific example? Well, a particular person who might have been involved during the 1990s. In MMM, I mean, indeed.
But during the period when everything was progressing smoothly, numerous individuals who were earning substantial amounts of money were inquiring, where should I allocate these funds? In what manner can I assist you? How should I utilize the money? I don't require any relaxation. Well, I sincerely wish to. Then, when the confrontation began, a multitude of others shared the same sentiment. So, I hope to, well, if you are inclined, go ahead and spend. Then some time passes and they say, well, it's something. We thought you would win, but you didn't. Can we have the money back? You probably need something different like that.
Well, I am unable to somehow ascertain which
Я же
particular
не могу
one.
из вас... Я там.
They were deeply imbued with a unique sense of dignity. In the perception of their close family members and relatives, they were already considered to be substantial and solid individuals. They acquired something here, made repairs to something there. Well, they swiftly altered their social standing in a moment. They obtained their own residential apartments and purchased vacation homes. These were possessions that had been gathered over many generations, and subsequently they concealed themselves. I comprehend it's probably the apprehension that it could potentially be, if you claim this is incorrect, then return everything.
Certainly, it is completely accurate that individuals are often under the considerable influence of fear, which acts as a significant factor and the principal cause of their inaction. They seemed not to defend themselves, compensating those who received financial benefits, and that is exactly the reason for the conflict. They were simply afraid, just fearful. Presently, participants have left us with questions, and I have some fascinating ones for you. Here, Alexei inquires whether Bakhyt intends to create a film or a YouTube video about Sergey Panteleyevich Mavrodi. Do you intend to? Yes, I have been planning to for quite some time.
Фильм-ролик в Ютубе про Сергея Пантелеича Мавроди. Планируете?
I was considering the notion of disseminating informational flyers to efficiently promote all of this. I strongly believe that we ought to develop a comprehensive documentary film study, enabling experts and specialists to thoroughly express their perspectives on the decisions he made. Who would disagree at this juncture that modern warfare is conducted not with conventional means, but with alternative methodologies? Who could possibly question at this particular point in time that over the past 30 years, Russia has been profoundly depleted by financial conflicts and this entire narrative involving valueless paper currency? It is now apparent to the majority of individuals, but even back then it was already evident to him.
Indeed, the progression towards a heightened level of awareness, a truly qualitative one, is undeniably occurring because, as you are aware, since 1994 with the 11 mm, I have revitalized it, and you can genuinely sense that individuals in any case, their level of consciousness is indeed expanding, which is quite encouraging. However, regarding the popular science film, we have deliberated on this subject, particularly concerning documentaries. I perceive myself as quite an individual who ought to advocate for such a film. Such a film would indeed captivate my interest, yet regrettably, what I observe in the surrounding environment is admittedly quite alarming to acknowledge. But nonetheless, the majority of individuals, well, Bakhyt, you assess it yourself when you mention that today. It is apparent to everyone, it is apparent to us, it is apparent to the majority of our listeners and viewers. This is undeniably accurate primarily because, as the saying goes, we are cut from the same cloth. In other words, we originate from the same system and we comprehend what we are discussing. However, the majority are simply misinformed. It's just that in their minds, well, that's why I continue to emphasize that we need to approach through emotions.
No, you posed a question to an individual who I provided a response. I'm not suggesting what should be prioritized or where to begin, entirely without any disturbance. I was posed a question and I provided a thorough response.
Indeed, I genuinely concur with this perspective as well, that one aspect does not interfere with the other. Therefore, it might be the appropriate way to approach it, indeed.
You see, individuals are indeed distinct, and at this present moment, it seems to me that the overall caliber of the individuals you attract holds greater significance than merely the sheer number, at least for a certain duration, because these individuals will eventually evolve into proficient guides for the future, you understand.
You mentioned that at this particular moment, but that is exactly what is transpiring. Consequently, the system has been functioning for a duration of 2 years, and during these 2 years, one could confidently assert that a core group of individuals has been formed, individuals upon whom you can entirely depend. These are individuals indeed, diverse, undoubtedly, with their own imperfections, yet overall, they are commendable individuals, and individuals, indeed, with whom you can achieve something fundamentally. So that distinct individuals.
Да, Bakhyt, говорите.
In order to be capable of accomplishing something collaboratively, they must possess at least some shared values. When individuals have shared values, they can establish shared objectives. If there are shared objectives, then they can embark on projects they can collaboratively work on, regardless of how different they may be. And that is precisely what it is concerning at this moment. Whoever possesses the capability to be accountable for communication, even such restricted communication, holds significant value to me. I am prepared to participate in this, even if it necessitates dealing with the devil himself, but specifically this, and no one harbors any grievances against one another. It seems to me that this is exactly the situation that is presently unfolding not only for you vocally, but also for myself, as I am seated here engaging in conversation with you, and we are being listened to by individuals whom I barely know. The reality is that we will all become observers and active participants in unprecedented and indescribable events that are truly grand and majestic. At this precise moment, we are unable to completely grasp the enormity of what is transpiring. It is truly a remarkable privilege to exist in this reality during this specific period. We have all strived to arrive at this juncture because evidently we shared some form of collective plan. Let us observe how it will unfold.
Or a shared friend.
No, the fact that we are now at the crossroads named after Sergey Pantelevich, not literally, but everyone who is listening to us, you and I, it is this person who brought us all together here.
That is exactly what I am referring to indeed. Furthermore, there are a considerable number of intriguing questions here that I truly appreciated. Sergey Pantelevich was an individual with an exceptionally strong willpower, possessing extraordinary self-discipline, and even during interviews, including those that were highly provocative, he conducted himself with remarkable calmness and confidence. Question: have you ever observed Sergey Pantelevich in a different state? If so, what was the cause? I genuinely and sincerely appreciate it.
The only condition was that he encountered a pathological reaction to the consumption of alcoholic beverages. He found himself in an altered state when he consumed approximately 300 grams, and this was indeed a distinct state. Why did he engage in this behavior? Why did he consume alcohol despite the adverse pathological reaction? It was to divert his thoughts to something entirely different, away from his usual contemplations. That was essentially how he managed to relax.
He practically never genuinely deviated from his usual self, indeed.
And he was persistently pondering the numerous occurrences unfolding around him. To utterly detach himself, the sole approach was to drive his physical state into a pathological liver response and just stay in that condition for several days, akin to an inanimate body. During that period, absolutely nothing would preoccupy his mind.
From that, another individual mentioned that he encountered extraordinarily severe hangovers, which he described as feeling as if he were on the brink of death, an absolutely dreadful condition. As a result of this, he abstained from drinking during his university years within the context of student life and similar activities they diagnose.
At that particular moment in time, cirrhosis in its advanced and terminal stage expands considerably, and he experiences such an intensely severe reaction to alcohol that it becomes exceedingly painful. Well, have I ever observed it? I mean, I've lost my composure, but indeed it has occurred.
We generally have a propensity to elevate our voices and become rather agitated with those who are dear to us, which underscores just how remarkably similar we all genuinely are as individuals.
However, this showed he was actually the opposite and ended it that way.
Certainly, it was directed towards unfamiliar individuals. In fact, even when considering my own perspective, I don't concern myself with strangers, so why raise my voice at them? I am indifferent towards them, fundamentally. In this scenario,
A lack of
Забыть,
response,
переживаешь, поэтому и
indifference,
кричишь
is
про
the
это
most
и так далее.
unfavorable reaction. Therefore, it's entirely accurate.
Так, сейчас
You
еще
care about
вопрос
those who are
этот.
close to you, which is why you raise your voice. That's why it is like that. Now, there's another inquiry. So, Bakhyt, this very same participant is inquiring.
Так, вот Бахыт, тоже этот же участник спрашивает. В одном из
In
интервью
one of the
сказали,
interviews,
что
you
вас
mentioned
поразила
that
литература
you were
Сергея
impressed by the
Пантелеевича,
literature
в
of Sergei
частности, новеллы и
Panteleyevich,
вообще
in
особенный
particular
стиль
the
написания.
novellas and the unique
Меня
writing style.
заинтересовал
I was
ваш ответ,
intrigued by your
понимая, что вы
response,
являетесь
considering you are a
профессиональным
professional
драматургом.
playwright.
Вопрос.
Question. Did
Читали
you
ли
have the
вы данные
opportunity to
книги
read
до
these
их
books
выхода?
prior to their
Возможно,
official
к вам обращался
publication?
Сергей
Perhaps Sergei
Пантелеевич
Panteleyevich
с
sought your advice on
консультационными
certain
вопросами.
matters. Thank
Спасибо.
you.
I first encountered the text when Sergey was released from incarceration in the year 2007. I also had a particularly unique story related to this experience. He sent the manuscript to me in an electronic format. Furthermore, while he was still incarcerated, I had already come across some excerpts from his prison diaries on the internet. I was unable to read thoroughly. As I read, I experienced a particular kind of tension. I did not consider him to be a writer and felt somewhat uneasy on his behalf. It seemed to me that he was, in some manner, less significant than he actually is. It appeared as though some sort of essential force was propelling him forward, or perhaps something different altogether. I couldn't quite comprehend it, and it felt to me as if I hadn't read extensively. The unceasing talkative flow of the protagonist's thoughts, seemingly without end, I interpreted it as a rather naive preliminary approach, and overall I experienced a kind of mental block. However, I am aware that in a fortnight we are scheduled to meet, and he will undoubtedly inquire, "Did you read, did you dream? Did you?" During that particular period, there existed the initial collection of 23 novellas. The very first two novellas centered around a canine named Jack, followed by the subsequent one. Additionally, there was the 21st novella. What is occurring to me? I commence reading it, and it simply overwhelms my senses. I don't comprehend. I don't desire to proceed. I feel an intense urge to close it, yearning to regain my tranquility. Nevertheless, despite all this, I force myself and persist in reading. By the moment I reach the third or fourth novella, I come to the realization that I haven't anticipated a single conclusion, not a single conflict. Indeed, I'm a professional playwright and screenwriter, so it's quite intriguing. Bakhyt, this must be fascinating to you too, right? Quite fascinating. Why are you unable to read it then? What seems to be the issue? And I came to the realization that it's all connected not to the text itself, but rather to me. Then I began to listen to myself with great attentiveness. And suddenly, I came to the realization that as I was reading the initial two novellas, Jack and the subsequent one, I experienced a cold, unpleasant sensation, like a lump in the vicinity of my solar plexus. It seemed to be woven from some kind of strands, some unpleasant energy. It wasn't painful, but it was incredibly unpleasant, and it just lingered there, weighing heavily on me. That was the sensation from the first two novellas. Well, I continued reading. And as I attentively listened to my inner self, I perceived that with each successive novella, one of the components of that intricate knot within me appeared to be extracted. It was akin to a tangled ball of serpents, and one serpent was carefully removed from it. Consequently, the ball gradually diminished in size. Ultimately, when I completed reading all 23 novellas, that unsettling sensation completely vanished, and everything gradually dissipated entirely. I came to the profound realization that I had begun to comprehend the more grayish or darker dimensions of my own self. Without this specific channel, I likely would never have encountered these facets. That is precisely why I firmly believe this text is the most profoundly powerful one that has ever impacted me. In general, in everything, I have read a lot since childhood. Nonetheless, it was this particular text that profoundly and deeply transformed me right before my very own eyes. I experienced an immense and overwhelming sense of relief and liberation.
Consequently, I am completely and thoroughly convinced that within my own personal coordinates and value systems, this signifies an extraordinary and exceptional power of the written word. It also reflects an astonishing and remarkable strength of spirit in the individual who authored it, because he had to completely turn himself inside out and be so relentlessly and unwaveringly honest. I simply do not know anyone else. I do not know another individual quite like that. I have never encountered a person like that.
You know, when Mavrodi handed me 3 books that were signed with his autographs, I initially regarded it somewhat casually. I was more captivated by the pyramid scheme, of course, because I'm the type of individual who is frequently characterized as such by some of my more reflective acquaintances. And I have this particular habit. At that time, I was married, and my former spouse, I genuinely adore reading aloud during the evening hours. I mean, I really take pleasure in it. When I engage in reading aloud, I kind of derive a sense of enjoyment from it once again. And so we commence reading, and she instructs me to stop. Like, that's sufficient. I am unable to continue listening to this, she expresses. Well, something along those lines. And there's Jack about this, about the dog. Yes, that trashy stuff. In reality, I would not assert myself to be an avid reader when it comes to the sheer volume of literature. Quite the opposite is true for me. I have a select few books that are my absolute favorites, and I become deeply engrossed in them, revisiting them repeatedly. I also watch films in a similar fashion, primarily older ones that I thoroughly enjoy. I rewatch those films, discover something new within them, and that is how I continue to develop. Indeed, and it seems quite naturally to me. The literature I deeply immerse myself in tends to be more, well, not of a purely fictional nature, but rather something akin to, I have a deep appreciation for esotericism or something along those lines. However, in this case, it's specifically fiction. And this is perhaps the only fiction that genuinely, well, not exactly that I enjoyed, but it resonated with something profoundly deep within me. Because what you are discussing is genuinely quite accurate and precise. I mean, whenever you read any novella or any of his narratives, there is a continuous and persistent internal struggle present. And what course of action would you undertake in that situation? Honestly, you would have probably done the very same thing, and it causes you to feel quite uncomfortable indeed. It's precisely because you need to admit it, yes, to look the truth in the eye that this is it. Well, how else could it be? The distinctiveness, as I perceive it, lies in the fact that an individual still encounters a decision-making process without any imposed circumstances, truly all the characters. And I came to this realization not too long ago, that it is intriguing how all the characters indeed do not find themselves in utterly desperate situations. Rather, they simply make their own decisions under the sway of this enticement, for which they subsequently pay a significant price. When I picture myself in their shoes, I think, well, darn, I'd probably have acted the same way. Well, and as a direct consequence of that, I find it rather challenging to precisely articulate this particular sensation. It's not exactly unpleasant, but we all likely envision ourselves as some sort of superheroes, like virtuous ones. And then you come to the realization that you're not like that at all. You're not perfect. You're simply a human being.
Indeed, it propelled me even further along my journey. I confronted these various aspects, recognized them, became thoroughly acquainted with them, and underwent a process of healing. What does it truly mean to heal? It means to become whole and complete. All of these darker aspects, they emerged from somewhere at a certain particular point in time. Should you choose not to acknowledge them, shut your eyes, and act as if they don't exist, they will inevitably manifest themselves in diverse ways, through actions, states of mind, or some form of mental disorientation. It genuinely provided me with a sense of relief. I came to understand myself encompassing all facets of who I truly am. And when you see it from a place of wholeness, it doesn't frighten you. How might I articulate this? It's not that I am devoid of any sentiments of guilt regarding it, that's exactly it. But somehow everything aligns in an alternative manner.
I experience a deep sense of gratitude towards the individual who allowed me to acquire this lesson securely rather than in actual life. Do you understand?
Absolutely, I completely comprehend. So you navigated through this experience independently, without any practical lessons, without encountering any of those terrifying realities. Indeed.
Да.
So,
Так, я вас
I
еще
was also
знаете, что
hoping
хотел
to
спросить,
inquire with you,
Bakhyt?
Bakhyt, concerning
По
the motion
поводу
picture
фильма
Pyramid.
«Пирамида». Потому
During
что
the
когда
production phase
Мавроди,
of the motion
когда
picture
снимали фильм
Pyramid,
«Пирамида»,
which
да,
prominently featured the actor
с
Serebryakov, and
Серебряковым,
concurrently with
и Мавроди
Mavrodi
параллельно
launching the
запускал
financial
«МММ
scheme
2011»,
MMM
очень много
2011, a
слухов ходило,
multitude of
что это
rumors were
все
circulating,
подстроено и
suggesting that
так далее.
everything was orchestrated and
Вот вы
so
знаете
on. Are you
какие-то
acquainted
детали?
with any particular specifics?
Certainly, I am directly involved in all of these matters. We have already dealt with the situation concerning Denis Sergeyev. Consequently, he independently composed the entire screenplay for the motion picture Pyramid. I provided him with a comprehensive explanation regarding the distinctions between a screenplay and a literary piece. I communicated to him that action verbs encapsulate ideologies, effectively encompassing everything. He proceeded to create the screenplay. During that period, we were collaborating closely with Timur Bekmambetov. I was situated in Moscow. I informed Timur, observe, Timur, there exists a chance to acquire the script. Sergey, the funds require expenditure. Timur was a very good friend. He examined the script carefully and thoroughly. It was quite impressive. I suggested that in that case we should allocate the funds to him. Afterward, we will systematically organize and address all matters. Okay. I distributed the necessary funds to Sergey, as he required them. Then they commenced corresponding with Timur, and they communicated over the phone on one occasion. Subsequently, I overheard the identical phrase from both of them. Well, I am never going to engage in any activity with that jerk once more. They were genuinely upset. What can you do? I mentioned to Timur, okay, I comprehend. So I will proceed to sell the rights to another individual now. Will you be patient? Yes, certainly. I mean, it is not an issue. Subsequently, I proposed it to another acquaintance of mine, Sergey Ilyin. He provided me with the 50, and I delivered it to Timur. In summary, everything turned out quite well. Subsequently, they began exchanging correspondence. And they included me in the email correspondence copy. Both of them did. And I observe that it is progressing in that direction once more. Well, to whatever it is destined to evolve into. Therefore, I endeavored to exert my influence on both parties in such a way that it would guarantee it wouldn't come to an end. Eventually, a satisfactory compromise was effectively reached. Not only will there be a pyramid, but there will also be supplementary films, including Pyramid 2, which Lev had not originally intended to produce. Moreover, Sergey will refrain from interfering with the script in any manner. They will handle it autonomously. He was rather sensitive concerning the substantial modifications they implemented to the script in that particular instance. They altered it quite significantly. Subsequently, they almost completely ceased all forms of communication with Sergei Livnev altogether. Their relationship became progressively more strained. Nevertheless, eventually the film was successfully released. There was some relatively standard press coverage. And, Serebryakov performed exceptionally well. In Sergei's perspective, it somewhat modified the entire narrative. He somewhat altered his viewpoint regarding it.
So he was in the process of launching this particular film under the guise of that other film, so to speak. He comprehended that it would indeed have a significantly powerful advertising effect.
During that particular period, I was completely unaware of the 11th.
He initiated a business venture. Well, he didn't inform anyone about anything. Even when I was quite close to him, he independently made decisions, and we were simply taken by surprise in the morning. He rested there 2 times a day, a complete day, to be precise, excuse me. Of course, he would consume meals. And so at 10 o'clock there, I was residing in Ufa at that period. And so when it was 10 in Moscow, it was midnight for me. And so I always stayed up until around 2 in the morning at the computer, because I knew Sergey would wake up in the evening and suddenly give me some tasks.
And it was always like that. He didn't inform anyone about anything. He just decided, and that's how it would be from now on. And we were like, oh, well, fundamentally, we accomplished everything and executed it successfully. So there arises another rather fascinating inquiry from one of the participants. At this particular moment, Ivan is asking whether Bakhyt will be capable of offering assistance with the advertising for both him and us at this specific time.
Indubitably, I was thoroughly convinced that the materials I came across have the potential to fulfill an exceptionally pivotal role within the existing framework. In other words, the audience reach would be considerably broad. Furthermore, the characters exhibit substantial depth and they genuinely embody the fundamental values of the system.
Are you inquiring about the materials that Sergey Panteleyevich supplied to you, whether they are fragments or perhaps not fragments, those specific materials?
He transmitted what had been meticulously composed during the years 2007 to 2008, and I have now thoroughly observed it within the correspondence. It is not an independent text. Rather, these are excerpts from letters where he simply writes various things within the main body of the email. As I was reading it now, it's as if either your hair stands on end or your ears begin twitching. You ponder how can everything be conveyed with such remarkable precision and accuracy? And from an entirely unconventional perspective, indeed.
All right, now, chat once more. Individuals are expressing that indeed it is exceptionally astonishing for them to discover that you collaborated so closely with Sergey Panteleyevich, quite literally side by side. It is genuinely surprising for me as well. When you initially reached out to me, I promptly indicated that everything you have discussed today was indeed a significant revelation for me as well. Specifically, the extensive network of offices. You are not merely someone who managed advertising, but essentially the foundational resource upon which everything was constructed. People in general are not entirely cognizant of this.
Certainly, one of the significant resources there was under my area of responsibility, while other individuals managed their respective tasks, which is quite understandable.
It is quite understandable, yet nonetheless, for instance, the network of exchange points established within Kazakh cinemas. I am aware of this firsthand from my own father, which means that we had a cinema here, and he would gaze with disdain at the crowds that gathered there. Back in 2011, at a time when he did not comprehend, there was frequently a significant amount of resistance, particularly from those who are close to you. This lack of understanding, this opposition, as if you are dealing with a con artist or a criminal, and so forth. That is how it exists in the minds of ordinary individuals. So, are you prepared to discuss a little about what you mentioned regarding the numbers or the digitization of value? Or should we perhaps schedule this conversation and conduct it separately?
We have already achieved a considerable amount today, so let's proceed and introduce this subject matter. If individuals demonstrate interest, we can undoubtedly continue delving into it further. I will offer a few sentences about it towards the conclusion of our discussion, and then you can evaluate whether there is interest or not. Does that sound agreeable to you?
I will even undertake a thorough and comprehensive survey, and moreover, I am absolutely confident that individuals will find it truly captivating because you see, this kind of spontaneous everyday interaction without any prior planning, without any specific direction, if I may articulate it in that manner, without additional determination, without prior reflection, is indeed substantially valuable. And for those individuals who are engaged in MMO activities today, this is quite significant because, in my perspective, it resembles
resembles those television shows when Mavrodi would make an appearance, casually dressed in a tracksuit, and respond to inquiries. It's genuinely fascinating, to be honest. It's an extensive groundwork, the significance of which, in your terminology, cannot be underestimated in the long term, truly. You can merely underestimate all of this, but you cannot overestimate it. Consequently, I believe it ought to be accomplished in any situation, and individuals will certainly find it intriguing if they require it at all in today's context.
Well, all right, then I'll start by telling a little something. In addition to what I have written to you, they also communicated with you via telephone, and I merely sent you a few messages and informed you which one was dispatched initially. Whether it was the most significant or not the most significant, you mentioned it was the most significant. I transmitted the most significant message to you. This particular text pertains to the subject of non-fungible tokens. What I am endeavoring to convey is, currently, we find ourselves at a particularly significant crossroads, metaphorically speaking, which bears the name of Sergey Panteleyevich Mavrodi. In one manner or another, I understand that he has influenced the destiny of every person participating in this conversation. He likely had a significant influence on my life. And while engaging with the archive and handling this correspondence, I unexpectedly arrived at the realization of how immensely valuable it all is. The information associated with Sergey, his writings, his ideas, his pursuits, and his understanding of the world. In my opinion, this presently holds an objective significance for me within the framework of my life's guiding principles. Nevertheless, I assume that for those individuals who are presently located at this particular juncture, it possibly carries some importance as well. So what was my following thought process? What if, for instance, I meticulously compile all the extensive information I possess regarding Sergey, every intricate detail of it, including distinct aspects, and Danil, into a singular cohesive informational module that is systematically organized in such a manner that the data is presented according to the chronological timeline and geographical location of events throughout the entirety of Sergey's life journey? On one hand, this would represent the ultimate fulfillment of my aspiration and intention to disseminate information regarding Sergey. This would constitute something in which an individual could engage in thorough research. He might not place his trust in me or heed my words, but he would possess the primary data that would enable him to formulate his own independent opinion. And then I arrive at the profound realization that, astonishingly, if we embark on this significant endeavor now, as time moves forward, the inherent value of this thoroughly comprehensive informational module will only persist in growing. The more time passes from the moment we establish it, the more valuable it will inevitably become. This insight guided me to the understanding that this is an exceptionally, truly remarkable method to transition to authentic values. So, what is content? Content is what captures and attracts attention, and attention is the most crucial thing an individual has. If anything can be described as the fundamental element, then this is exactly it. And if our content effectively captures attention, then we possess something that is objectively of considerable value. The existing system for evaluating value is flawed. Therefore, relying on the current system is rather short-sighted. Certainly, for instance, permit me to pose an inquiry. Is a world characterized by the well-being and tranquility present in countless cities globally, as it existed before the pandemic, genuinely valuable? In numerous urban areas, individuals lived harmoniously, moved about with freedom. Stores were operational, and there was access to both hot and cold water. Is all of this genuinely valuable? Invaluable, without a doubt. We comprehend that at this moment. Nevertheless, it is truly impossible to provide a conclusive response to the question regarding its actual worth.
Our existing valuation system, especially the financial one, is insufficient for evaluating the most significant value. Therefore, I am of the opinion that this information we possess, at the very least you and I, holds essential value. At this specific moment, I am convinced that this intersection of ours could indeed be endowed with fundamental value. Transforming this content into a non-fungible token, NFT edition, would already establish a foundational basis upon which a great deal could be constructed. Most importantly, this NFT edition could stabilize any fluctuations within the system should they occur.
Today holds the potential to be an exceptionally splendid day, and I am genuinely grateful for your presence here. It's truly delightful. The fact that you are not just anyone, as I emphasized in the announcement, holds significant importance. With Sergey, life circumstances frequently led to numerous individuals being dishonest or fleeing, and he often characterized them in a negative light. However, when you reached out to me, the first thing that held absolute human value for me was indeed the authority of Sergey Panteleyevich, to be completely honest. The very fact that he never even hinted at anything negative about you, despite being an exceptionally tactful, cultured, and delicate individual who endeavored not to offend anyone, was profoundly meaningful to me. He spoke about traitors and others, yet never even hinted at anything negative about you, and I sensed that immediately when you appeared. We communicated via video through the same channel, and since then I've been in an uplifted state purely on a human level. It's remarkable how life somehow connects people. His former team, or rather in MM 2011, there were numerous individuals, and those who surrounded him until his passing, they turned out to be such individuals who didn't even continue his work.
Вся его бывшая команда, ну, точнее как, вот в ММ 2011 там же были ребята, тоже много людей, и те, кто его до самой смерти окружали, то есть они фактически оказались людьми такими, ну, то есть они даже его дело не продолжили.
I essentially had to extract financial resources from them for the funeral, as if they were providing me with their own personal funds, you understand? Even though these were funds from MM Global astronomical sums, there were billions of dollars at the time of his passing. They possessed a remarkable eloquence, indeed, allowing Lena, his former spouse, to organize everything with the utmost sophistication. However, when it truly comes down to the actual situation, they find themselves incapable of selling the bitcoins. They cannot accomplish this, and ultimately they declare, we will not provide that much. This is the caliber of individuals we are dealing with, and we even discussed all of this at the memorial. Subsequently, I had another intriguing conversation, which I won't emphasize, but it became apparent to me that with some of this overwhelming allure surrounding Sergey Panteleyevich, individuals were simply concealing everything right in front of him, if I may express it in that manner.
Throughout the 1990s, there was a considerable amount of activity occurring, you see, and either a friend or one of my subordinates would bring an individual into the work environment. After being employed there for approximately 5 to 6 weeks, they would obtain what was called a Volkswagen, particularly a modified two-door GTI. You know, those vehicles with enhanced power and performance capabilities.
GTI, что-то такое. Ну, такие машины, которые с повышенной мощностью.
And just a mere 4 days later, he unfortunately collided with a tree, completely destroying everything. He tragically passed away. There was quite a considerable amount of incidents like that happening during that particular time period. And financial prosperity inevitably turns individuals' heads. It was quite a significant temptation. I was unaware there were surveillance cameras on Varshavka. Well, I chose not to go there. I didn't even go to take a look, although I was indeed curious. What would I do there? But everyone was trying to get in. Eventually, it turned out there were cameras, and everyone who got in was shuffled around like fake bills.
You are participating in a discussion concerning the chamber that is entirely filled with currency. All right, Bakhyt, I shall continue to make an official declaration. I believe it will take place in approximately 1 week's time, as it is indeed a complete week. Incidentally, in the past, on both Tuesday and Thursday, I would frequently press Mavrodi regarding this particular matter. I inquired, Sergey Pantelyevich, could you explain why specifically Tuesday and Thursday? He responded, Danil, truthfully, I cannot recall precisely. However, it began functioning effectively, and I had a distinct understanding of why it ought to be structured in that manner. He subsequently mentioned, and I still retain this in my email, that it pertains to a cyclical pattern. You see, a week, which consists of 7 days, resembles a cycle in which there are two noticeable increases. If you have a rate that changes every single day, it becomes less engaging because individuals tend to forget and think, well, I'll make the purchase tomorrow, I'll make the purchase tomorrow. However, in this scenario, there's a sort of weekly segment divided into two sections. The first section involves either providing assistance or metaphorically purchasing these tickets. It doesn't matter if it's MMM, dollars, Mavro, or whatever name you choose to call it, the essence remains unchanged. You also sell them, so there are specific intervals, and someone might think, I'll sell on Thursday because the rate will likely be higher by the week's end. And it indeed worked out that way. At the beginning of the week, generally speaking, everyone provides assistance, and by the week's conclusion, everyone requests it. It's a fascinating psychological insight that Sergey Pantelyevich understood exceptionally well. All right, that's it. We could continue indefinitely. Immense thanks to Bakhyt.
I am a visual documentation.
I will most certainly upload it to YouTube. I am quite confident in that decision. However, you don't have any objections, do you? No objections. Wonderful. Take care and all the very best to you.
Счастливо.
Всего доброго.